A small town in the northwest of England. The awful murder of 3 little girls here in Southport. And then a descent into violent riots across the country. But this wasn't an entirely spontaneous or entirely British reaction. For the first time, we have uncovered and mapped the networks on Telegram, the encrypted messaging app where the flames were fanned and the riots were organised, and found that this wasn't just homegrown violence, but foreign interference. The vast majority of the most influential accounts were from outside the UK, and they seized it as an opportunity. And experts think Southport is the playbook for what might happen next time. Late autumn in Bristol, and the streets are serene. There's little trace of the disorder that gripped the city on a hot night in August. But it did come quickly, apparently out of nowhere. I was reporting when it did.
This is the most aggressive we've seen it so far between protesters. There were lots of missiles being thrown.
Hundreds of people clashed. But they were not members of the far right, at least not in the traditional understanding. They, and others like them across the country, were useful for advancing the international far right's aims, and they were also expendable.
Here it really is pitched battles, skirmishes. This is two sides who really do want to have a go at each other. They want to confront each other. They have been confronting each other, hurling missiles, throwing punches as well.
At least 300 people across the UK have been sentenced for their involvement in the disorder, including at these clashes in Bristol. People like Ashley Harris. He was given 3 years for violent disorder. Up the hill, Jamie Easterbrook was also involved in skirmishes. He was given a 20-month sentence. And next to Easterbrook was Dominic Capaldi. He was jailed for 34 months for violent disorder too. His neighbour told us it was a shock that he would get caught up in something like that.
He's just a caring bloke, and he's very quiet chap. He got led along. He got dragged into something, and he didn't realise what he was getting dragged into.
The Bristol riot, like others around the country, including the first protest in Southport, was organised on social media, on X, formerly Twitter, and Telegram. The head of MI5 last week described this type of extreme right radicalisation as a pick and mix ideology and a crowdsourced model, where people pull on hatred and misinformation from a multitude of mostly online sources.
The riots were a national story in different places all across the country. They're a local one too. The people who are here in summer on the bridge behind me throwing bottles, the people who were charged, convicted, sent to prison, they were all residents of Bristol. But there was external interference too, as our research shows. A network of the far right online ready and waiting to take advantage of that moment and use it to further their own ends.
It's this wider network of conversations and analysis that made us realise there's a global strategy at play. We and others have previously reported on the pieces of false information that fed the riots, but this is the whole puzzle.
Every circle here, we call a node, represents a chat or a channel on Telegram, and the lines in between the different circles show how information travels between these chats.
We've been working with PROS, an open-source intelligence agency which has a deep penetration of far-right and conspiracist networks on Telegram, to find out who is behind the messaging.
One interesting thing we can see here, especially considering this is the first day, is that the source of most of the information that people are talking about on Telegram isn't British, English language communities. It's international far-right conspiracist influencers whose take on the Southport murders is heavily influencing the British conversation.
And this is a map of all those accounts for the 2 weeks after the Southport murders. The red is UK-based extreme right-wing or conspiracist accounts, and you can see it's dwarfed by other sources. Purple for non-UK-based English accounts, but also Germany in orange, along with French and Spanish at the top of the chart. And yellow is Russian language accounts, further away, but still steering the conversation.
There are very, very extreme groups who routinely funnel information into these broader networks, who were clearly, specifically and directly trying to incite a race war on the back of the Southport murders.
The most widely shared content on Telegram during the initial 3 days of the unrest was primarily authored by non-domestic accounts from the USA and Europe. They played a significant role in shaping the UK's online discourse, amplifying far-right narratives and disinformation. Of the top 20 most important sources in those 2 weeks after the attacks in Southport, only 6 were based in the UK. The rest were abroad. This post from a right-wing Spanish politician and member of the European Parliament falsely said the attacker was a Muslim immigrant. We tried to contact the account but received no reply. Silvano Trotter was one of the other most influential users, ripping an article from the Daily Mail and posting his own comment, falsely peddling the name Ali al-Shakati, also incorrectly saying he was an immigrant who'd entered the UK on a small boat. We reached out multiple times to the most important accounts to ask about their involvement in these online spaces. One of them agreed to an interview, so we headed to Europe. So we're on our way to Strasbourg to understand why what was happening in the northwest of England was of such interest to online influencers abroad. Strasbourg in France, on the border with Germany. Its quaint medieval streets and canals have little in common with those of Southport or Bristol or Rotherham. But this is home to Silvano Trotter, the influencer we mentioned earlier. He's a successful telecoms entrepreneur, but he also spends a lot of time commentating on the news and expounding his views, some of which are unconventional.
We can tell that the moon, scientists know this, is older than the Earth.
He was banned from YouTube, Facebook and Twitter before being reinstated on X by Elon Musk. And he's unapologetic about that false post. When it came to the Southport murders, you did this Telegram post which was viewed, hundreds of thousands of times, giving a false name. Why did you put that post out there?
C'est toujours difficile, de toute façon, qui fait pas d'erreur, mais quelque part...
It's always difficult. Who doesn't make mistakes? But all the same, he's still an immigrant, even if he was born in Wales, even if he's 17 years old. He's the child of Rwandan immigrants. For me, where you're born is irrelevant. If my mother was born during a trip to Switzerland, we would not consider her in any way Swiss. It's the origin and the culture.
Yeah.
Et la culture.
We can talk about that in a second, but specifically that, that was false information. Do you regret putting false information out there, given that you say you want to fight misinformation?
Oui, bien sûr.
Yes, of course. But don't forget that we tried to hide our emotions. Ultimately, if I'd said an Englishman, a Belgian and a Swede had massacred those 3 little girls, and who actually wanted to go on and massacre more, I think people's reactions would have been the same. They'd have been angry. Angry. Obviously, they're angry about a false piece of information around immigration, but I think they would still have been angry. Losing their children, murdered like that. All parents could understand that anger. The anger is legitimate.
Telegram spokesperson Remy Vaughan told us, Telegram is not a place to spread violent content. Moderators removed UK groups and channels calling for violence when they were discovered in August. To dissuade criminal misuse of Telegram, IP addresses and phone numbers of criminals who violate our rules can be disclosed to the authorities in response to valid legal requests. We are ready to cooperate with the UK government through the appropriate channels. It wasn't just Telegram where there was a disproportionate influence on social media by accounts outside the UK. X, formerly Twitter, was used as well. Non-domestic actors repurposed local incidents to push inflammatory content into the UK conversation. This video was originally posted to X by a local journalist on site at a vigil on the 30th of July at 5:54 p.m. But the video was later ripped and repurposed by this American influencer, 1,000 miles away, Amy Meck, associated with the US-based Rare Foundation, known for promoting anti-immigrant and pro-Russian narratives, put this out. By 10:45 p.m. the same day, she had reshared it with inflammatory anti-Muslim text, propelling its reach from a modest 11,000 views on the original video to 5.5 million within just a few days. Within the first 10 minutes of Amy Meck's post, the content had been seen within 20 countries and generated more than 10 million impressions.
We knew there was conversations happening and there was stuff on social media, but not the extent of you know, how far it was spreading, definitely not.
Jackie MacDonald is the freelance journalist who was covering the Southport vigil. She posted the original video that Amy Meck subsequently ripped.
It wasn't true at all to what was happening. Her language, the inflammatory use of what she was saying and the way she framed that video wasn't what we were seeing in front of us. We were seeing a respectful, peaceful, quiet vigil for those children who had died that day.
We asked X for comment, but didn't receive a reply. Amy Meck told us she rejected the labels of hard-right, far-right and conspiracist, saying these were based on biased generalisations, and that I unequivocally reject any form of violence that took place during the riots. She added, I was upset to hear that the video originated from a freelance journalist. I will ensure they receive proper credit, along with a public statement. She also said, there's an unfair notion being pushed here, that I am somehow responsible for how other people use my material. In the same way, you're making me responsible for the tipster's material. Just as I had no control over how the tipster's video came to me without proper attribution, I also had no control over how others used or interpreted my content. Trying to blame me for how others engage with or share my work is irrational. In Southport, the memorials to the 3 murdered girls are still in place. One of the tragedies of the riots is that they eclipse the grief the town felt and still feels. But Al Baker at Pros is worried that this wasn't a one-off, that the networks we've uncovered are waiting to pounce again, but to go further next time.
Large swathes of the online far right see Southport as a missed opportunity. There is a huge amount of recrimination in those spaces, people blaming one another for how quickly the riots fizzled out. And I think we should be very concerned that they're not going to make the same mistake twice.
Southport is a memorial. It's a warning too. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.